Peter, let's start with you. I want to talk about the politics of this interest rate cut. What does it mean for the election? And I want to remind our audience, as Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are saying this rate cut was political, the Fed chair is Jay Powell, who has been in that position since the Trump administration and was appointed then.
Yeah, Jay Powell's not thought to be much of a political figure. In fact, as you rightly say, he is a Trump appointee. But look, doing this obviously in the fall of a campaign year inevitably is going to raise questions about that. I think, though, that what it says is that the Fed believes that it has basically beaten inflation, that it's time now to loosen up money a little bit, keep the economy going well, to provide funding for businesses that want to expand and make sure that unemployment doesn't begin to rise with the tight money supply. Now, what that means for the election is hard to say. I mean, the truth is history shows that people's opinions about the economy are not really related to numbers. They're not really related to facts that they're presented in the newspaper. They're related to what they see in their own lives. And it's so late in the system, so late in the cycle, it's hard to imagine people's views changing as a result of something like this. But obviously, it suggests that the economy at this point, with relatively low inflation, relatively low unemployment, relatively high stock markets, wages going up, is in relatively good shape. That doesn't mean that there aren't problems. And one of these things that the rate cut may do is to help to address one of the biggest ones, which is the cost of housing, which is cramping a lot of young people who can't afford to buy places to live. This is one thing that may help make things easier, but it won't necessarily change things in the next 58 days. It's awfully close to the election to change people's attitudes.
Except, of course, mortgage rates are already going down. Peter just said it. Affordable housing is a huge issue. The rate cut is going to help with mortgages. How does the Harris campaign see this rate cut? What are they going to do with this? Because the economy, though Peter mentioned lots of very, very positive things, is a very difficult needle to thread. Yamiche.
Well, it's certainly a difficult needle to thread, and that's why we've seen Vice President Harris, when she was initially really putting out her first set of policy proposals, she immediately made housing a central part of that, talking about the fact that she wanted to help people with down payment, giving something like $50,000 for down payments to new first-time home-time buyers, but also saying that she wanted to work on trying to get corporate landlords to not be able to raise the rents in the way that she believes they've been raised unfairly. So there is really this push to start explaining to the American people what a Harris administration would do for them. The other thing, though, is, and I think Peter really hit on it, it's really a vibe election when it comes to the way that people see the economy. And I'm always interested in sort of hearing how people see their middle class experience, because you have people that are waitresses and that are sort of listening closely when former President Trump is saying that he wants to pass some sort of policy where overtime wouldn't be taxed, even though the details of that are still very vague and it's not clear how he would do that. You also have someone like Vice President Harris is going after people who want to own homes and who also are renting apartments and are feeling the squeeze there. So there is this real race to try to figure out who's winning on the economy. The polls show over and over again that Americans still largely trust former President Trump on the economy, but I think a lot of that, when I talk to voters, some of that is just the fact that he's seen, because of the reality TV show, because of his name being on buildings, that he's seen as sort of a wealthy man who can deal with the economy. But I think Vice President Harris, as she continues to message on this, she's trying every single day to really bite into that and to chip away at that in a way that will help undecided voters and those key battleground states begin to trust her more.
Yes, and he's become wealthier selling his supporters Bibles and sneakers. Now he'll have a crypto exchange. And, of course, he's got his own stock for his company that does virtually nothing. Dave, these battleground state polls are really tight. Any chance this rate cut could move things?
It does fit into the Harris campaign's overall narrative, which is things that have improved. They need to improve more. People need to have prices lowered in a tangible way. This is tangible. People are going to see the effects of this. This is why not just the Trump campaign, but really a chorus of conservative surrogates have complained about the timing of the rate hike. The rate cut. They're complaining because they do think it'll be beneficial to Democrats. And Yamiche was talking about some of the ways that Donald Trump has been combating this. He has the record of 2017 to 19, not 2020. He also has been, she was saying, making these promises that are not costed in any way. He did it again in New York tonight, talked about capping credit card fees. He's talked about a series of tax cuts. He's talked about universal IVF paid for by the government or mandated for their insurers. He keeps promising things that would decrease costs for certain Americans, a lot of Americans who get tips at their wages. And Democrats have struggled to compete because they are not just rolling out ideas they can't pay for. This does help because they can refer to the rate cut.
Can I interrupt you?
Sure.
They're not struggling to compete. Donald Trump is offering a new goodie and a new tax cut every day and has yet to articulate how any of it is going to get paid. And while people might want to look at Donald Trump's term pre-COVID saying the economy was strong, the deficit ballooned under Donald Trump more than President Biden. And I know debt and deficit are things people don't pay attention to anymore, but they will when they're truly out of hand and you see the bond market crumble. So it's amazing that you just hear, well, Donald Trump is offering all these things. Yesterday, he said, I'm going to cut your car insurance by 50%. How? He doesn't regulate that. We're not going to make car insurance run by the government. And even any government involvement here, it's run by the states, not the federal government. So Democrats aren't competing. They're not competing with Donald Trump lying.
Yes, I think we actually agree with each other. And I liked your post about that yesterday. Truthful information on X. That's nice. Nice twist to put truth on that website. That's what I mean. It's not a struggle like they're waking up and agonizing over it. It is one party in power saying there are tangible things we can do to change your life. And other nominees are not like this. Mitt Romney was not proposing a different idea every day that he thought might poll well, but hasn't been tested. And that's the contrast. Democrats can point to concrete things that are changing. Maybe they're changing too late for some people, contrasted with Trump ideas that are coming so fast and furious and are not coming with a plan to get through Congress. Everyone who covers Congress and talks to Republican House members and senators finds Republicans saying the same thing. Well, gosh, I guess that's on the table. None of them have a plan to get it through the House or through the Senate or even through reconciliation. So that's what I mean. It is not a agonizing problem for Democrats. It's how do you compete against a candidate who keeps proposing random ideas that sound great with no way to pay for them. One way you can in the reality-based zone is by saying, look, the Fed cut rates because we've beaten inflation. That's the message they're going to be saying. It's a very traditional message. Our policies have worked after a long time of striving. Look at how your rate's going to go down.
Or perhaps voters can think back to junior high student council elections. The person who offered no school on Fridays and getting rid of the cafeteria for fast food, they're not actually telling the truth. Peter, on top of today's letter endorsing Harris that was signed by more than 100 former Republican officials, more than a dozen former Reagan staffers also endorse her. Reagan, who in the once House of the Republican Party, there was no higher throne one could sit on. I want to know, what do Republican elected officials that you talk to, what do they say when endorsements like this happen?
Well, look, they obviously dismiss people like that as rhinos. That's the phrase, of course, former President Trump uses, Republicans in name only, people who've left the party. And it's true. Look, since Trump came on the scene, a lot of establishment Republicans, people who devoted their lives to Republican parties, have either left the party or at the very least broken with Trump. They do not see in him the second coming of Ronald Reagan. They see somebody, in fact, who has the very opposite approach that Ronald Reagan had. Trump is anti-free trade, anti-internationalism, anti-alliances. He's anti-optimism. All of those things are things that were associated with Ronald Reagan and are not associated so much with Trump. And so you do see a lot of conventional and established Republicans breaking away. Dick Cheney is the most prominent one in recent weeks. Whether that makes a difference with the voters, who knows? But I mean, it does say something about where the Republican Party is these days, and is trying to figure out its own identity. And people who used to be stalwarts are no longer welcome.
Yamiche, Donald Trump is trying to shut down Democrats who are calling him a threat to democracy by trying to link that statement to the second apparent assassination attempt on his life. But he's doing this while he's amping up his own attacks on his opponents. What is the Harris team's take? How are they going to handle this now that he's complaining about their rhetoric, but he's only amping up his?
Well, it's very interesting. The Harris campaign has not said much about sort of this effort by Republicans to paint them as the ones who need to tone down their rhetoric. But I have been talking to a number of Democratic operatives who are familiar with the Harris campaign and who are talking to the Harris campaign. And then what they tell me is that this is really something that they feel like is not going to stick. They don't think that this has legs. They feel like Republicans are really playing a game here, and that they really don't have a leg to stand on, because all you have to do is roll the tape, including after the July 21st assassination attempt, to find videos of Donald Trump using inflammatory language, including even in the interviews where he's saying they shouldn't be calling me a threat to democracy. In one of those interviews, he said, well, President Biden and Vice President Harris, they're the real threat. So he's actually condemning the language while also echoing the same language.